The city had stopped making sense long before it stopped making noise. But now even the silence felt broken, like it was trying to remember how to echo and failing. He walked through the ruins with the kind of focus that came from not wanting to think too much, stepping over shattered glass and bent metal as if they were just inconvenient decorations. Survival, he had decided, was mostly about lowering expectations. If you expected nothing, the world rarely disappointed you. It still tried, of course, but at least you could pretend you were winning. He adjusted the strap of his bag and muttered to himself, "Today's goal, don't die. Optional objective, find something that isn't completely useless." He paused, looked around at the collapsed buildings, and added, "Ambitious, I know." A faint sound interrupted him, not loud, not urgent, just wrong. It didn't belong to the wind or the occasional shifting debris. It was softer, almost deliberate. He froze, head tilting slightly, every instinct telling him to walk away immediately and pretend curiosity had gone extinct along with everything else. "Not my problem," he whispered, already taking a step forward. The sound came again. He stopped. "Definitely my problem," he sighed, because of course it was. It always was. He moved carefully toward the source, slipping into what used to be a subway entrance. The air grew cooler, heavier, carrying the faint scent of rust and something unfamiliar, something clean in a way the world no longer was. His grip tightened around the metal rod he carried, not because he thought it would help much, but because holding something made him feel slightly less ridiculous. The station below was dim, lit only by thin cracks of daylight filtering through the ruined ceiling. And there, in the middle of it, sat a woman. For a moment, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. A person, just sitting there, calm, unharmed, as if the world above hadn't fallen apart. She looked up at him, and their eyes met with a strange kind of stillness, like neither of them was entirely sure the other was real. "Okay," he said slowly, lowering the metal rod just a fraction. "Either I've finally lost it, or you're very bad at being dead." She tilted her head, he blinked, then pointed at himself. Human, tired, slightly annoyed. Then he gestured vaguely at her. "You." She followed his movements with careful attention, then pointed at him and repeated, softly, his tone but not his meaning. It sounded almost right, which somehow made it worse. He stared at her for a long second. "Great," he muttered. "Language barrier, exactly what I needed today." Then he noticed her ears. They were long, elegant, rising just above her hair in a way that was subtle enough to miss at first glance, but impossible to ignore once seen. He leaned slightly to the side, as if changing the angle might make them disappear. They did not. "Right," he said quietly. "Of course, because regular problems weren't interesting enough." She watched him with open curiosity, her gaze moving over him as if she were studying something new, something oddly fascinating. There was no fear in her expression, no hesitation. If anything, she seemed intrigued. He pointed at her ears, raising an eyebrow. "You're aware those are not standard, right?" She blinked, then reached up and touched one lightly, as if confirming their existence for his benefit. Then she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too precise, too intentional, like she had learned it from observation rather than instinct. And yet, it wasn't unsettling, just different. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Okay," he said, nodding to himself. "New rule. If I start talking to aliens, I officially admit the world has gone beyond repair." She stood up. He took a step back on instinct, grip tightening again around the metal rod. She didn't react to it, didn't even seem to notice. Instead, she simply stepped closer, her movements smooth and unhurried, as if distance was a concept she didn't particularly respect. "Let's not do anything dramatic," he said quickly. "I've had enough of that." She stopped just in front of him, close enough that he could see the subtle differences in her features, the way her eyes held a depth that didn't quite align with anything human. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she reached out and gently tapped his arm. He looked down at the spot, then back at her. "That's it. No glowing energy, no sudden explosions, just a tap." She tilted her head again, then unexpectedly, tapped his arm once more, slightly firmer this time. He let out a short laugh despite himself. Wow, terrifying, truly. But something shifted in that moment, something small and impossible to ignore. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt shared. And that, more than anything else, made him realize his day had just become significantly more complicated. He decided, against what he loudly claimed was his better judgment not to leave her behind. The decision felt less like a heroic choice and more like forgetting to say no at the right moment. She followed him out of the station without hesitation, stepping over debris with an ease that made him suspicious of gravity itself. "Just so we're clear," he said while climbing over a collapsed barrier, "this is not an invitation. This is temporary proximity." She stepped beside him, glanced at his mouth as he spoke, then nodded once, as if she understood everything perfectly. He narrowed his eyes. "You definitely don't understand me." She nodded again. "That feels sarcastic," he muttered. The streets above were no kinder than before, but now he noticed things he usually ignored. Her ears moved slightly at sounds he couldn't hear yet. A distant crack echoed seconds after she had already paused. When he kept walking, she lightly grabbed his sleeve and pulled him back just as a chunk of concrete dropped where he would have been. He stared at the impact, then at her. "Right, so you hear the future now." She blinked. "Good, great, that's normal, I'm adapting." They continued in an uneven rhythm, him pretending he was still in control, her quietly proving otherwise. Every so often she would stop, tilt her head, then redirect their path without explanation. He complained every time. "This is not how directions work," he said at one point. "You don't just feel your way around like a confused GPS." She pointed at him. "Yes, I'm aware I'm the confused one, thank you for that." By the time they reached what used to be his shelter, a half-collapsed structure he generously referred to as structurally questionable but emotionally reliable. He was already tired of being wrong. Inside, he dropped his bag and gestured around. "Welcome to luxury living. Open floor plan, excellent ventilation, and a roof that only collapses occasionally." She walked in slowly, her gaze moving across the walls, the broken equipment, the scattered remnants of a world that had stopped trying. Then she approached a rusted panel embedded in the wall, something he had long ago categorized as completely useless. "Don't bother," he said. "I've tried hitting it, kicking it, and insulting it. Nothing works." She placed her hand on it. For a second, nothing happened. He crossed his arms, already preparing a sarcastic comment. Then the panel flickered. A faint hum rose, weak but undeniable, like something waking up after a long, reluctant sleep. He froze. "No," he said quietly. "No, we are not doing this." The light stabilized for a brief moment before fading again, but it was enough. Enough to break something in his understanding of the world. He stepped closer, staring at the panel as if it might explain itself. "I spent weeks trying to fix that," he said. "Weeks, I even apologized to it." She looked at him, then at the panel, then gently tapped it again. A small spark flickered in response, almost playfully. He let out a slow breath. "You've been here 5 minutes." She smiled, that same precise, practiced smile, but this time there was something new in it. A hint of satisfaction, maybe even amusement. He pointed at her. "If you start fixing everything, I'm going to have to rethink my entire personality. I've built it around things not working." She tilted her head, then walked past him, lightly brushing her fingers along another broken device. It responded with a faint pulse, weaker than before but still there. He watched her move through the space, quietly reshaping what he had accepted as permanent ruin. "This is going to be a problem," he said, though his voice lacked any real resistance. She turned back to him, her ears shifting slightly, her expression calm but focused. For a moment, the air felt different, charged with something he couldn't name. Then she pointed at him again. He frowned. "What?" She tapped her head, then pointed at him once more. He stared, trying to piece it together. "You want me to do that too?" She nodded. He let out a short laugh. "Yeah, no, I can barely fix my sleep schedule. I'm not reviving dead technology." She stepped closer, looking at him with that same quiet certainty, as if she had already decided something he hadn't agreed to yet. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that certainty made him more uneasy than the ruins ever had. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, something wasn't just surviving. It was. He woke up to a sound he had almost forgotten existed, steady, rhythmic, alive. For a moment he thought it was a dream, some leftover echo from a world that no longer applied. Then he opened his eyes and saw the faint glow along the wall, the panel she had touched now breathing with a soft, consistent light. He sat up slowly. "No," he said, voice rough. "Absolutely not. We agreed things stay broken." She was already awake, sitting near the entrance, watching the horizon as if it were telling her something important. Her ears shifted slightly before she turned toward him, that same composed expression waiting for him to catch up. He pointed at the glowing panel. "Explain." She didn't. Instead, she stood and walked past him, placing her hand briefly on his shoulder as if that answered everything. "It doesn't," he added quickly. "Just to be clear, that explains nothing." But he followed her anyway. Outside, the city looked different. Not restored, not whole, but no longer entirely defeated. Small flickers of light appeared in distant structures, weak signals of systems trying to remember their purpose. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some grand transformation. It was quieter than that, persistent. She stepped forward, then paused, looking back at him. He hesitated. "If this is the part where you expect me to do something important, I should warn you, I specialize in low expectations." She waited, he sighed. "Fine, but if I accidentally fix the world, I'm going to complain the entire time." She almost smiled. They moved together through the streets, her guiding without forcing, him resisting without stopping. Eventually, she led him to a structure he had avoided for weeks, a collapsed energy hub, unstable and dangerous, the kind of place you pretended didn't exist so it wouldn't become your problem. He stopped. "No, I know that place. That place is a bad idea." She stepped inside. He looked up at the broken framework, then back at her. "You're really committed to making my life harder." Inside, the air felt heavier, charged with something dormant. She moved to the center, placing her hand against a fractured core. The faint hum returned, stronger this time, but uneven, like a system trying to wake up without knowing how. Then she looked at him. "No," he said immediately. "I see that look. That's a terrible look. That look means I'm involved." She reached out, taking his hand before he could argue further, and placed it against the surface. For a second, nothing happened. Then everything did. A sharp pulse ran through the structure, not painful but overwhelming, like standing too close to something vast. He felt it move through him, not electricity, not exactly, something more precise, more intentional. The broken systems around them responded, light flickering in hesitant patterns, connections forming and failing and forming again. "I'm going to regret this," he said through clenched teeth. She didn't let go. The hum stabilized. The light grew stronger. And then, suddenly, it worked. The core pulsed with steady energy, the surrounding systems aligning as if they had been waiting for a missing piece. He staggered back slightly, pulling his hand away, staring at it as if it might explain what had just happened. "I did something," he said, stunned. She nodded. "I don't like it." She nodded again. He let out a breath, somewhere between a laugh and disbelief. "I spent all this time surviving, and now you've got me fixing things. This is a terrible character arc." She stepped closer, her gaze steady, her presence calm in a way that no longer felt foreign. He looked around at the faintly lit structures beyond, the quiet signs of a world shifting back toward life. Then he looked at her. "You're not staying, are you?" Her silence answered him. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already known but hoped to avoid. "Figures. You show up, change everything, and leave me to deal with the consequences." She raised her hand, hesitated for just a moment, then gently tapped his arm, just like the first time. He smiled, softer this time. "Yeah, I remember." She stepped back, her form already feeling distant in a way that had nothing to do with space. The air shifted again, that same quiet energy surrounding her, and for a brief second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then she was gone. He stood there, alone again, but not the same. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It carried weight, memory, possibility. He looked down at his hand, then at the faint light spreading through the city. "All right," he said after a moment. "Let's see what else I can accidentally fix." And for the first time, he didn't say it like a joke. The first thing he fixed after she left was a door, which was disappointing because he had secretly hoped his next achievement would sound more impressive. Still, the door opened when he touched the panel, the mechanism responding with a smooth click instead of the usual stubborn refusal. He stared at it for a long moment. "I've become useful," he said, as if testing the sentence for structural integrity. "This is deeply concerning." The city did not transform overnight. It resisted him in small, familiar ways, as if reminding him not to get arrogant. Some systems flickered and died again. Others responded only halfway, like they were unsure he deserved their cooperation. But enough of them worked to prove one thing: what had happened in that energy hub hadn't been temporary. He walked farther each day, carrying less out of necessity and more out of habit. The ruins still stood, but they no longer felt like a dead end. They felt unfinished, like a conversation paused mid-sentence. And for once, he didn't mind being the one expected to continue it. "All right," he muttered while crouching beside another broken panel. "Let's keep expectations low. You do something small, I'll pretend I'm impressed." His fingers brushed the surface. A faint pulse answered him, weaker than before but steady. He smiled without realizing it. "You're learning," he said quietly, then paused. "Or I am. One of us is definitely improving." Days passed, though he stopped counting them the old way. Time felt less like something to survive and more like something to use. He began mapping the city, not for escape routes but for possibilities. Places that could hold light, structures that might stand again, systems that could connect. It was slower without her. He noticed that most when he caught himself turning to speak, only to find empty space where she used to stand. The silence still answered, but differently now. Less sharp, more patient. One evening, as the faint glow of restored energy stretched across a small section of the city, he returned to the subway station where he had first found her. He wasn't sure why. Curiosity, maybe, or something less logical that he refused to name. He stepped down into the quiet, the air unchanged, the space exactly as it had been. For a moment, it felt like nothing had happened at all. "You could have left a note," he said, glancing around. Something like "gone to fix another planet, be back never." Very professional. No answer came, he nodded to himself. Right, silent type, consistent. He moved to the spot where she had been sitting that first day and stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing in particular. Then, without thinking too much about it, he placed his hand against the wall beside him. The response was immediate. A soft glow spread outward, not just from the panel, but along the surrounding structure, like a memory waking up. It wasn't as strong as the core, not as dramatic, but it was enough. Enough to remind him that what she had started hadn't ended with her leaving. He let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said, "I get it." For a moment, he almost expected to hear that faint, deliberate echo of her laughter. The slightly delayed, slightly off timing that had somehow made everything feel less broken. But the silence held, and that was all right. He stepped back, looking at the light, then up toward the fractured ceiling where thin lines of daylight filtered through. The city wasn't whole. It might never be, but it wasn't empty anymore either. Neither was he. "Okay," he said, turning toward the stairs. "New plan. We fix what we can, ignore what we can't, and complain about everything in between." He paused, glancing back one last time. "You'd like that," he added. Then he walked out of the station, not because there was nothing left behind,